Hi everyone, my name is Sunny and today's video will be about Neptune in the 12th house, or if you have Neptune in Pisces, this video will be for you. This is finally my last video, so if you have been watching the rest of the videos, thank you so much. And if you're not, and this is just the first video, thank you still so much for watching. So if you have this placement, you're gonna notice that, and I say this with every other placement, Neptune in, well, in the form of an appearance, I think that Neptune tends to be very eclectic when it comes to the way you dress. So especially in this placement, you could like having so much foreign taste when it comes to your fashion sense or your self-expression. So maybe you get something that you really like from South Africa, or maybe you end up liking a certain dressing habit from Canada, and maybe you like how makeup is done in Asia. Like, you start picking up very distinct forms of self-expression, and you kind of mesh it well into yourself, and you get a little bit of everything, and it makes you who you are. And people are very easily the people who can, well, I worded this terribly, but people can basically easily recognize your style because it's very unique. It's very one of a kind. And sure, sometimes you can be a little bit out of this world, in the sense of, like, it may not seem, maybe it's not always the most cutest outfits for the general public, but it's definitely unique, where people might be still gravitating to kind of turn and look at what you're wearing, for example, or turn and look at how you're dressing yourself within your other accessories, like your hair, your face, your jewelry, your hands, your nail polish, your feet, your shoe wear. Even especially your feet with Neptune. Talk about very unique pieces of footwear. Or maybe your preference is also to be barefoot most of the time because you don't like the sensation. There's people out there, and this isn't me shaming them, but there's people out there that have a preference to not be wearing shoes because it's restrictive, there you go. Or if it's their preference to not wear closed shoes, maybe they're picky about that because some people say that Pisces have terrible feet. This is hit and miss with every person, but maybe it's because you have wider feet, like W-I-D-E-R-D. I might have misspelled that. W-I-D-E-R, wider, in the sense of like shoes, closed shoes, heels, anything that's like a wedge or something. Like, it's hiking boots, even at that. It's not the most pleasant for you to be wearing because you start noticing that it's maybe you're I feel like I'm always like picking on Pisces, but maybe it's because you have more foot issues that might be concerning. Like, example, you guys can be prone to having calluses, or you guys can be prone to having your feet swell. Maybe it's not always your body that's retaining the fluid, because Neptune will always kind of make you retaining fluid for a while, maybe not forever, but sometimes it's more frequently. And you might notice that it might be the retention you might be more noticed on your feet, because maybe you like to be walking often, but not consistently, but just often, or you're up in your feet, or you're not moving them basically, or exercising them or stretching them, and so they might end up feeling more sore. They might feel a little bit more sensitive, and so you wearing closed shoes is a big no-no for you, because you feel like you're hurting your feet. You're more sensitive, or you is it callus, the bottom part? You might just feel like the posture is terrible too. So maybe you just start feeling that, where it's like, or maybe because you loved accessorizing for the cutest shoes maybe early on, example, in your life, and they were terribly made, because maybe you decided to buy them like cheap, right, in the sense of like texture, or the position of the heel, or maybe just the way they were made. Like, it's just cheap. Not like cheap, they look cheap, but cheap as in like cheap labor, I guess was the best way of saying it, or just not quality, basically, that you mess with your feet, and now your feet are very sensitive to wearing certain types of shoes, or, for example, or even flats. you're like, you could be someone that has like flat feet, and you're like, oh, I hate wearing these flat shoes, or I hate wearing ballet flats, or I hate being barefoot. Like, it could be one of those things where you notice that your feet are very sensitive to many types of footwear, and so you have to be very aware of what you're wearing, unfortunately or fortunately for some people. Or you could prevent, like, it's not, sorry, you could prevent that. Sometimes it's not always negatively aspected, so when you have good aspects, maybe your feet are looking great. Maybe you don't have any weird situation going on with your feet, any ingrown like toenails, or any weird skin issue, or maybe just the texture, like it just doesn't feel rough maybe. So it does feel like maybe there's times where your feet are well taken care of, and then there's times where they're not. It's really like one of those things that some people notice them. They're very noticeable for some people. I personally don't like to stare at feet. I don't like feet, but to each their own. Some people are really into them. That's totally fine, I guess. They're their thing. And some people just really like accessorizing them, even wearing like anklets or toe rings, or doing manicures and consistently doing that. Like, it could even be your thing where you spend your money, but that can also be like some illusion qualities, depending if it's aspecting that, where you feel that you like to get your, I don't know how often people get their like petties, but I'm gonna say like maybe 2 to 3 times a week, not a week, a month, every 2 to 3 weeks maybe, and then you get like a refill or something sometimes, or you clean them up and change the I don't go to salons like that, but I'm gonna assume sometimes it can be like that, or you can do it yourself. It's very DIY too. So you could be like that, where you're someone that's constantly changing your nail polish, maintaining them, trimming your nails, and keeping them neat and clean. So it could be one of those things. But do keep in mind, like, that's for some people. It's not for everyone. Not everything that will be said on videos, including my own, will be relevant to you. You know, it's gonna be something that is a hit or miss, because it's such a general, how could I say, observation? There, that's what I wanted to say. So do keep that in mind. And I also think that you can be very sensitive to certain allergies as well. Every placement of each house will have their own specific allergies too, and just Neptune itself, but you could be prone to more sensitivities when it comes to certain allergies, or even you can notice the allergies stemming from your feet or your immune system. Your immune system might flare so much more faster than maybe other people, or it could be really good for a while and then it's really bad. So it could be one of those things depending on what you're surrounded with, because you easily pick up stuff. So it's one of those things where it's like, there's good things with Neptune, but there's also some not so great things about Neptune that you kind of have to upkeep and maintain, to make sure that the planet doesn't affect you as negatively as it could, right? So that's just one of those things. The triggers could be your environment could be full of toxins, or maybe you're just sensitive to certain allergies around yourself in nature, like something simple as trees and pollen and dust and mites and all these things. I don't want to think about that. I hate thinking of the smaller things. But yeah, it could be one of those things where, like, pet hair, like, you could start getting the sniffles, and then your eyes can get all watery. And like, of course, like, I always call it, like, I've mentioned it, I don't remember which video for the Neptune series that I've been doing, but Neptune always has watery eyes. But the reason why you would probably have watery eyes is probably because your allergies are being flared up. Sometimes, it's not always. And of course your eyes could be lighter too, especially with this placement. I think that doesn't always mean it's gonna be like really exotic colors, but even like the shades of brown are gonna be lighter browns, right? Or more sensitivity to light, even at that. So it could be one of those things where you notice that people always compliment you in that way. It's like, oh, you have really pretty eyes, or you really like put nice makeup that it accentuates your eyes. Maybe you have almond eyes, maybe you have really nice lashes, or maybe you just have very sleepy eyes. Sleepy eyes are definitely Neptunian. Or people could just think you look sad, and people think, oh, it's so cute, it's so like sweet, and you're just like, I'm awake. I'm not sleepy. There's nothing wrong. Like, it's just one of those things that sometimes people project their sensitivities to you, or people project like, oh, it's so sweet and innocent. Like, certain looks even at that can be projected onto you in that way, where it's like they project the way their likings are to you, like, oh, you would look great in this or you would look great in that. So maybe they might also try to mold you to look a certain way. It could be one of those things, right? And then it's just funny, I think. But going back to the allergies part, I don't even think I finished that thought. When it comes to this, I also think your allergies can be flared up, right, by natural environment issues, or maybe also because you are, I usually think of the water houses when like water planets and water houses are together, for example, for sure, that you might end up feeling more prone to sickness or more prone to allergies because of humidity or because of what your home environment can be. So like maybe your home is more easily prone to having high humidity and it can create mold, for example, and you could be sensitive to it. Doesn't mean you always might pick up on that, because almost majority of the houses can have it, but of course every house is different on how it would have even the types of kind of mold, right? So it can vary from the types of mold, the locations. It can be restrooms, a wet area, moist areas, areas close to water, or even like if you have your AC units, that can be something that you notice because of dripping and stuff like that, or because there's so much like humidity in the air because it rains frequently where you're at. You can notice that the house starts to get moldy because of it, because it picks up humidity. No matter how much you clean that home, it just always picks up, especially like on wood. Wood sometimes can be like your furniture pieces gonna get, I feel so bad when that happens, but it can get a little bit more swollen and then it starts to rot sometimes. So, and it takes a while. It's not something you notice right away. It's definitely a slow planet. So by the time you notice these things, oh my god, it's possibly like so advanced, like in like how it progressed, that you're like, how did it even get to this? I always clean, or I always look at this, but I never looked at that one spot that I just missed. So it could be one of those things that you're like, oh, I have to remediate and I have to fix just to help my allergies, because it can be, you could be fine sometimes, but as you age, you become so sensitive that it may cause you some other chronic issues, for example. So it's one of those things that do keep in mind, that I always think of that when it comes to water planets or water houses. Like, make sure that, you know, the water around you isn't causing some of the stresses in your body, right? If that makes sense. And that's not for everybody, it's just for some people, right? Or even at that, you can be prone to living in areas where you have more water around you, surrounded by lakes, surrounded by oceans, surrounded by rivers and cascades, or even by streams. Or you could even be prone to living in areas, if this isn't the location, to be living in areas where it rains pretty frequently, so it's a little bit more greener. Or it could be a little bit more easier when it comes to flooding, like having thunderstorms and hurricanes and, you know, all these kinds of weathers, like hail too, but that's a little bit harsher. Where it can be like, it's just water prone, like a lot of water areas that you end up living in. And that can be great, and that can be annoying too. I really think that it's up to the person to decide how they perceive these placements. So, you know, keep that as a thought. And aside from that, you should also consider the fact that I mentioned this with other placements, but when it comes to this, I think that Neptune kind of blurs the lines of when it comes to your escapist behaviors. This is such a good placement to hide so much from yourself and from others. Really good at hiding, and that's not a compliment. Sometimes you need to address the issues that your self-destructive issues, like you not wanting to deal with your emotions and confront them, can kind of make your body react certain ways, right? So maybe you start retaining, that's why people always think, oh, water placements always end up retaining more fluids and stuff, or they just look like you retain more pounds, right? So it's not necessarily that you're like doing anything different to yourself. It can also be a hormonal issue too, but you might notice that you end up keeping that weight on because your emotional state might have something to do with that, right? So sometimes it can take you a long time to really address it, because you don't always know what the root problem is, or you don't know, just because you know how you feel. Like, let's say you feel like a sad emotion. That sad emotion isn't really gravitating you towards what's really going down beneath the surface. I think that's where you would have to kind of dig deep within you, within your subconscious, not self-conscious, within your subconscious, to figure out where did this feeling start stemming from around what age, or from around what period, like a few months ago. Like, it could be one of those things. And maybe you might start to slowly decipher, but then you might tiptoe back, because if it makes you fear what you could find out, right? So it's one of those things where you might take some time, solely because there's a lot of fear of knowing what you could find, or fear in actually stepping up to the plate and actually addressing it and being more confrontational about your emotions and, you know, your spiritual self and your psyche. And maybe it might be helpful to lean on that, your belief system, whether it's spiritual or religious, to kind of help with coping in a healthier manner than your other possible escapist behaviors, which could be like sleeping. This is a great placement for sleeping as a form of escapism, or drinking and smoking and taking any other illicit substances, even sugar cravings, which can also be forms of addiction, and anything else that you feel like. And you might notice that sometimes you might replace one with another for a while, just because you don't know any better, sometimes because it's one of those things that it makes you confused as to how you're navigating. Doesn't mean you don't want to change, but it means that there's a lot of trials and errors in maturity, in growing into maturity. You might be an incredibly wise person once you're old. I'm not saying that, you know, you have to be super smart when you're old, but your experiences would wisen you up with time. I always feel there's like certain connections with Saturn in that way, where Saturn gets better with age and time and experience, and so does Neptune. And I think all outer planets do that the same. Outer planets maturing is are very helpful with skills, because they have the experience and knowledge, and then they can help others do the same. So even if you feel like it might work against you for a while, you could eventually help out somebody else and teach them a thing or two about how to navigate the circumstances that you experience that are very similar to their experiences. So it can be also tricky when it comes to isolation places, or I should have said isolated places, jails, secret places, hospitals, mental facilities. There could be fears when it comes to these places, and it ending up in these places, because it forces you to be in solidarity, right? I think I'm saying that word, but isolation, basically, on your own. And you wouldn't have any way to escape, except for the fact that you would have to address some of the mental health issues that are going on that you might have not noticed, and you just assumed it was because of other factors unrelated to you. It feels like you want to put the weight on, like, let's say, the blame, basically. You put the blame on something else outside of your body, basically, because if something happened, it's because of this, it's because of that, it's because of this, but never because I did this, right? So sometimes it could be one of those things. Taking accountability is something hard, not, you know, what's that word? Not impossible, but it is possible to take accountability. But with time, I do think that maybe it's one of those things where you might learn on your own better than when people point it out. If people point it out and someone close to you is hitting those 12th house placements, and they might see that sometimes because you're extremely intuitive as well, and you're extremely capable of having extra abilities, but just because you can have them doesn't mean you like to develop them, or you know that yourself, right? It's the house of the subconscious, so it might take you much more time to actually get in contact with that, or feel like it's something you want to develop, or if you do, because it is also, you know, the house of letting go of stuff and just not wanting to deal with that, escapist, putting that away, hiding that away from yourself, because it can be scary for some people. So do keep that in mind, that it's not always pleasant to be dealing with this energies. So that's what I have for you guys. I will continue to write more notes. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon, and bye-bye everybody.